we have been witnessing a very major trend for the last 3 to 4 years, I would say. When we removed Article 370, which should have actually been thrown out decades earlier, decades back. Fortunately, the Modi government took courage in both their hands and they did away with this obnoxious anachronism of Article 370, which should not have been imposed in the first place at all. It was Nehru's indulgence to Sheikh Abdullah which brought about this article. We all know that story of how Ambedkar, the father of our constitution, had refused to add any such statute to the Indian constitution. And subsequently, Nehru himself had to put Sheikh Abdullah in prison. So the point at issue is that we did away with Article 370. At that time, we were being threatened with rivers of blood. We were being threatened with mayhem by the likes of Mehbooba Mufti and even Abdullah Senior, right? And we were being told कि भारत की अर्थी को कंधा देने के लिए कोई नहीं मिलेगा in Kashmir. Grandiloquent statements to scare the hell out of the Indian government. The Indian government doubled down and went right ahead. But we took sensible, sane precautions. We supersaturated the Kashmir Valley with troops and force levels. The Amarnath Yatra was on. Under the pretext of that Yatra, we were able to pump in additional forces. The valley is supersaturated, and to that extent we found the logic of numbers. God is always on the side of the big battalions. Kashmir has been largely pacified, barring the odd, attack or two, and whenever they raise their heads, they get it like they have just gotten it. The intelligence network is working beautifully because the Kashmiri people have for the first time experienced a real, genuine peace dividends where you couldn't, fly the tricolor in Srinagar. Today it is a flutter with tricolors. The Dal Lake, entire margins are aflutter with tricolors. That has been the sea change. All stone pelting has stopped, barring the odd stray incident, most of which is confined to targeting individuals of the Pandit community or some labor here and there. By and large, Kashmir has been pacified. But when you see north and south of the Pir Panjals, it is a push-pull kind of a system, amplifier, with years of experience of fighting terrorism in Jammu and Kashmir, also fighting in Kargil. I can tell you that there is the system of the valley, the Pir Panjal ridge, and then the Rajouri Punch areas to the south of it. When you increase force levels in Rajouri Punch, the terrorists just cross the Pir Panjals and go to the valley. This is what they used to do in my time. When you increase the force level in Kashmir, vice versa, the terrorists tend to seep into, run from there and come into Rajouri Punch area. Now the fact of the matter is, and I can say it from my personal experience, I was GOC Romeo Force in the years 2004-2005. In the year 2003, Operation Sarp Vinash had been conducted by my predecessor, General Hardy, leader of the Para Commandos Special Forces. It was a very successful operation. They had built a base area high up in Hill Kaka. There were 100 to 200 of them there. He hit that base area. They killed about 60, but the rest of them fled. And they tried to merge with the population. It was left to me, my task, to then ferret them out of the population and eliminate them. So we went for a command and control attrition, go for the top leadership. Within 1.5 years, we had broken the back of terrorism in the Rajouri Punch area. By the time I left it, it was as peaceful as a lamb. For 10 years thereafter, this peace persisted. This peace dividend persisted, and people were going out for picnics. They had started, even at the end of my tenure, they had started. There were no ambushes, there were no killings of civilians, no IEDs, no abductions, etc., no mine blasts. All had been pacified, and most of the terrorists had then tried to either go back across the LC, or they had tried to cross over the Pir Panjal. Then they went into kilo force areas, which then had a bonanza in terms of kills. The same, unfortunately, once we pacified Rajouri and Poonch, quite obviously complacency sets in. When for 10 years at a stretch nothing really happens, and the number of terrorists, there were no terrorists left to kill. They came down. After I left, I had killed 108. Next year they were down to 34, and then it was down to 8, 9, 10, and so on, because the back had been broken. The back had been broken. Unfortunately, as a result of that, there was a kind of it is natural that you try to say this area is dormant, let's take troops out from there and put them more where they are needed or required. But we did a little more than that. During the period of COVID, very few in India are really aware of this fact, that the government had stopped all recruitment to the armed forces. The quite rationale was that we did not want infection to spread to the armed forces. That would have been disastrous. So there was no recruitment for 3 years. And every year 60,000 men retire. 60 into 3, 1,80,000. The simple fact is that we have reduced the Indian armed forces, especially the Indian Army, by almost 2 lakhs. 1,80,000 is a huge figure. For a country that has to fight all its war more or less in the mountains, whether against China, whether against Pakistan, this was, to my way of thinking, a very dangerous decision. The fact is that thereafter we went in for the Agniveer scheme. We thought that there would be accelerated burst of recruitment to make up for the 1.8 lakh men that we had lost. Every year, like I said, 60,000 people retire, but the 43,000 Agniveers are being recruited. So every year incrementally you are trying to cut the armed forces, the army down, and then out of these Agniveers who are going to be recruited, only 25% will be kept. I think this, I'm sorry, has dangerous implications, and I'm sure the government is taking a second look at it, and the army is taking a second look at it. We are trying to give our 2 penny bits, whatever the veterans that they are with military experience. We are trying to give our 2 penny bits that we need to relook this problem very, very seriously, because Pakistan is now trying to exploit these gaps. How is Pakistan trying to exploit these gaps? It found the gaps in Rajouri, Poonch, Riyasi, Kathua, Udhampur, Doda, Kishtwar. Troop densities had been greatly diluted. I remember 2004, 2005, there were 18 battalions in my time. And after about 4-5 years, 6-7 years, they had been brought down to 7. I don't know how many battalions there are now, but the simple fact is that when you dilute troop densities to this degree in an area that is so rugged, that is so mountainous, that is so full of dense jungle, where hundreds of thousands of people can hide. In the Second World War, you please remember, whole Japanese divisions could melt away in those jungles, and a division has 20,000 people. So, for 2, 3, 4, 5, 10, 20, 40, 50 terrorists to just melt away in those jungles is absolutely no problem. We must take a look at our damn terrain before we are in such a hurry to do away with manpower. The ostensible reason was that we would like to get weapons, that we are short of weapons, we'd like to modernize. It's not an either-or equation, I'm sorry, as it is being treated. The Russia-Ukraine war tells you, is Russia short of weapons? Is Russia short of equipment? We are buying it from them. They are selling it to the world, apart from fighting on their own. They are not short of equipment, they were short of manpower. And initially they decided to go in With very limited manpower, they thought it would be over in a jiffy. It was not. And then they were hoist with their own petard. Putin had gone in with 1,50,000 men. Ukraine had 2,50,000 men to start with, and then went up to 5 lakhs. And surely it began to tell on the Russians, who now had to hold 1,200 kilometer front. So there were gaps. The American satellites were picking up the gaps. The Ukrainians attacked in Kherson. They brought out troops from Kharkiv to reinforce Kherson. The American satellites saw the gap in the Kharkiv area. They asked the Ukrainians to attack, and the Russians were pulling their hair. You can't do this to an army. You can't make it firefight, run from here. The same tired troops who have fought non-stop for 6-7 months, now you start shuttling them around north and south. The Russian general staff, there was a hue and cry in Russia, and then they had to mobilize first 300,000 reservists, and now they have mobilized about 5 to 600,000 more troops, and they're almost 1 million men. So why mobilize in the middle of war? Especially India has no tradition of mobilization. We have always had large standing armies. World War I, 1.3 million, World War II, 2.5 million, and then we have had till now 1.3 million standing army, which we are desperate to somehow reduce. This reduction of manpower, given the present context, present state of technology, drones are lethal, missiles are lethal, cruise missiles, ballistic missiles, they can take out entire units in one go. And when entire units get written off, you need reinforcements, replacement units. And if you do it to yourself, you cut your manpower. For God's sake, we have the largest population in the world, 1.4 billion. It's more than the population of China. And unlike the Chinese population, this is a young population. This is a young population. So, we actually need to create jobs. Unless we create jobs, we'll have severe problems. So far, we have not felt those problems because our infrastructure push, the roads, highways being constructed had absorbed a lot of manpower. 2 years down the line, you won't have this thing. You can't construct the same road 10 times over again. So quite obviously, then people will be redundant. They'll be looking for jobs. Already the employment problem in the villages especially is fairly critical. Fairly critical. We can juggle figures what we like. The ground reality is there for all to see. So in such a scenario, to be cutting jobs, I think, is a crime against your own people. It's a crime. I would appeal to those who are manpower cutters to kindly understand the overall context of the manpower, the excess manpower that we have and which we need to usefully absorb. We need to usefully absorb this. So we need to make up our deficiencies in manpower, otherwise we'll have more problems as we go along. Second factor is, in case you have reduced your manpower to such a degree, thinking that you will now fight a defensive battle, on your own side of the terrain, and this is in absolute contradiction to what our leadership has been saying. We had hit across surgical strike with our para commandos, special forces, who had gone in 2-3 kilometers deep, killed 40, come back without a scratch. 3-4 months, 5 months, 6 months, Pakistan was quiet. Then when it fingered us again in Pulwama, we did the airstrike. 80 kilometers inside Pakistan, 250 odd terrorists killed in their training camp. And Pakistan has been quiet for a year. We could take away Article 370. I fail to understand why we have stopped ghar mein ghus ke marna. Why have we confined ourselves to reactive, defensive stance, consequence management on own side of the border? in a purely reactive stance, giving the entire initiative to the enemy. It is dangerous to cede initiative to the enemy. Let him choose when, where, how to strike. And we only go putting out fires here, putting out fires there, putting out fires there. That is irrational, illogical, and I don't expect the Indian state will do that. I can't understand why we haven't reacted so far. I mean, it was a challenge to the Modi government. On the day that Modi 3.0 was taking oath, they killed 9 and wounded 42 Indian citizens. And thereafter, we lost almost about over 40 plus Jawans in their spate of terrorist incidents south of the Pir Panjal, and also activity has started north of the Pir Panjal. We are heading for elections in that area. We need to hit across. We need to be offensive. We cannot fight a defense battle. That is fatal. We need to teach Pakistan a lesson. And China, if it comes to its aid, it knows it cannot because of the correlation of forces on the Himalayan border. And China is looking towards Taiwan. China is looking towards the Philippines. I'm not very sure how many troops it will get, how many fronts it wants to open at the same time. So Pakistan will be quite alone. Pakistan is on the brink of economic collapse. We had thought that Pakistan would like to be left alone to lick its economic wounds. But the Pakistani army and ISI are exhibiting a death wish. They want to commit harakiri by provoking India. Look, even if there is a limited war, and there should be a limited war, our government has set us a clear task. Take back POK, which is legitimately ours. If we are to take back POK, and that would amount to a limited war. Sorry, I don't agree with all optimists who think that POK will just walk on its own and come into India. It will need a limited conflict because the Pakistani army will mount a vicious crackdown a la Bangladesh, fill us with refugees, etc. It will need a vicious, limited war with Pakistan. And let me tell you, whatever be the military outcome, there will be one grand outcome of an India-Pakistan war if it takes place within this year, next year, or the year after that. The Pakistani economy will collapse. It will cease to exist. It will go kaput. I hope the Pakistani generals know that much about their own economy. They can put that in their bloody pipe and smoke it. The simple fact is that the Pakistani generals are used to getting their way. Whether the people of Pakistan get 2 square meals a day, whether their fans work through the summer heat waves, they couldn't give a damn. They want their toys to play catch up with India, to match up India, and thump their chest as a gorilla superpower of the Cuba of the East, as they were called once upon a time. The fact is, this country will cease to exist. We don't want it, but if they want it, well, what can we do? I think we must comply. We must fulfill their wish, especially if they are going to make themselves a migraine, a nuisance, a never-ending nuisance which will never stop, will continue to poke us in the eye, continues to rile us, continue to try and drag down our progress. Hum to doobe hain sanam, tumko bhi le doobenge. I think then they need to sink. I think it is time for the Indian state to now deliver the coup de grace in case this country doesn't want to listen to reason, to logic, and to common sense. Thank you.